What up, guys? This is Pete, and welcome back to the Carrot Poker Podcast today. This is season 2 of the much-loved episode, our series of episodes called Ask the Coach. I assume they were much loved. I mean, I'm not really basing that on any data, but I hope you guys like it. In this kind of episode, I take a bunch of questions from one of my students, usually, and these are questions I've never heard of or seen before, so the student tries to just find out a bit more about, pick my brain about the most interesting forms, areas of the game that he may be unsure about or may think that lots of people in his shoes would want to know about, and I just give honest answers. So I've got Ben with me today. How's it going, man?
Hi Pete, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. So Ben, you have been working with me for probably, a couple of months now?
Yeah, I think 2-3 months.
Cool. Let's have a little bit of intro about you. Just tell us where you're at with your game before we get on to the questions.
So I've been grinding at 2NL, I think, for about 8-9 months before I got the Grinders Manual in October, and I was kind of stuck where I was, I think. And since then, I've moved up to 5NL, and I just didn't really have a clue what I was doing. I wasn't studying properly. I didn't understand the fundamentals, though I was doing okay. And that's where I'm at with it now, basically.
Cool. So since working together, you've moved up one stake, which is the start. You've got to beat 2NL, obviously, before you can go any further. And that's that under your belt, which is good. I'd say the trap really sets in, the rake trap, the skill trap, whatever you want to call it, about 10NL these days. When you can break through there, that means that you've achieved actually something pretty good these days. So on the right tracks anyway. Why did you decide to work with me instead of just going at it alone then?
Well, I like the Grinders Manual a lot. That was helpful. But when you're working through stuff on your own, it's difficult to know if you're doing the right thing or not. For example, end of action spots I find difficult. And you can post hands on 2+2 and so on, but you might not get a good response necessarily. And so I need direct feedback, basically, to let me know where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough and very common. End of action spots, just in case anyone's wondering, are situations where we face a bet, and our call, if we choose to make it against that bet, will be the last action of the hand. So it could be that we're facing a river bet or we're facing an all-in, but basically lots of money's just gone into the pot and we decide whether to call or fold. Basically, those kind of spots are very tricky for beginners. So enough questions to you. Let's take some from you now to me. So fire away with question number 1 whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so as somebody who wants to move up through the limits, I was curious how you did that and what your progress was through the limits, basically, whether you started off, 2NL all the way through smoothly or up and down, or where did you start things?
Well, this is a funny story, actually. I'm sure what you'd like to hear is some kind of super disciplined story about someone who started at 2NL and gradually just built his way up to 200NL, but unfortunately, and maybe humorously, the story is not quite that simple, so I'll tell you exactly, month by month, what happened, right? And you'll laugh at this, and it'll give you some hope that I was once a fish. So I started off playing poker online in probably 2006, just played $1 or $2 tournaments, had no idea what I was really doing, but had some kind of vague sense that I was logical and that I should be good at this game. I guess I started off with that. Didn't really get anywhere playing tournaments the first time round. I first built a roll when I started playing sit and goes, so $22 sit and goes, $11 sit and goes, 6 max, that kind of thing, in 2007. And I would build a roll up to about $1,400-$1,500 just grinding the SNGs. Then I would play 100 NL 6 max cash with 15 buy-ins, which, as you can imagine, is not a very good idea. But 2007, we weren't really as aware about bankroll management. The rule of 20 was our rule. If you had 20 buy-ins, you were suddenly rolled for a stake and you went for it back in the stone ages of poker. So I kept trying to be a cash player. I wanted to be a cash player all the time. That was my dream, was to just sit and grind it out in cash and not have to wait for these stupid structured things to begin and end. The sit and goes, that is. So I would play 100 NL, get really tilted because my mental game was an absolute shit show, and just bust my bankroll and then rebuild it playing the sit and goes and then bust it again. And I think that happened maybe 3 times or something. And then one day in 2008, I was like, fuck this, I'm going to play 50 NL cash, or was it? No, it was 25 NL cash. So 2008, 2009, I started grinding cash and I just stopped playing SNGs completely. And it may horrify you to know that I've never ever played lower than 25 NL except for when making a video or something like that. but I knew that I already had like enough awareness of what I was doing through forums, communities. I'd been part of a community called Flopturn River for the last couple of years at that point, which was a very good place to learn. Had a lot of the strongest players in the game giving free feedback to the weakest players in the game, which is just like an amazing thing that doesn't really happen anymore now that everyone's money grabbing about poker because of how tough it's got. But back then, money came very easily. The poker community just ebbed and flowed, and it passed knowledge on, and it had a very kind of it was like a big commune basically that just treated each other really well, that place that I was a part of. So by being a member there, I was able to figure out, I guess, a lot of things about the game that other people didn't know because I was part of this community, and I knew that I could have a run at it. So I ground up a roll playing 25 NL, 50 NL. I remember I quit poker one night actually, and I was just like in the middle of a terrible downswing at 50 NL. It was like 17 buy-ins or something. I just moved up from 25. So I was like, you know what? This isn't making me happy. Maybe I'll just take up chess again and do something else. Yeah. And one night I got home drunk from the pub, and I was like, I'll just play a little bit of poker. And I won like 11 buy-ins in like 40 minutes. I ran like God. And I was like, oh, this game's so fun. I remember how fun it is now. I'm going to keep playing.
Going drinking and playing then?
Yeah. Well, I used to do that all the time. I used to come back drunk and play 100 NL. Like part of that first part of the story in 2007, when I was about 20 years old, was me coming in at 3 a.m, completely messed up and just like losing 8 buy-ins at 100 NL. That was been there, done that, you know. So at that point though, that you're asking that I got to in 2009, I'm kind of like, I guess I'm playing 50 NL again seriously now because I've had this massive upswing. I've woke up the next day with a clear head and thought, okay, that was fucking lucky that happened, that I didn't like just bust out what was left in my account, and now I'm going to have another go at it. And I just had this thirst, you know, and things weren't going so well with my girlfriend at the time, and I kind of shut myself in this world of poker for a while, and just like, that was all I did. I just did that, and like occasionally saw some friends or whatnot, but I just like was obsessed. And I think you need a bit of obsession sometimes to make it a game this tough, and because of that, over the year 2010, 2011, broke up with that girlfriend, was single for a bit, you know, had even more time to really focus on the game, and then, you know, ground up a roll and moved through 50 NL, 100 NL to 200 NL, started making training videos, coaching. And since I started coaching, I always kind of knew, like, this is what I want to do. I want to teach other people. I want to work with other people. And poker was an amazing vessel for me to be able to teach, because I love teaching, but I didn't want to teach like English or maths or anything like that in school. So this is kind of that's what I really got out of it, was when I realized I was good enough to teach others. That was when I was like, okay, I've succeeded. I've finished my journey through the stakes. And, you know, I've never played like 500 NL, 1000 NL. I've never made a ton. I've made like, I don't know, a good amount of money playing poker when I ground full time. Like, I supported myself doing it for a couple of years, but I've never had the urge to be a really high stakes baller that just played for a living. Coaching is what I kind of wanted to do, and then I kind of, when I got to that level where I could solve the game and write a book and stuff, I thought, you know, that's me kind of finished my journey through the stakes now. So that was how it went. It was very variance filled, and at certain points I may not have even made it. Like, I could easily have just like not played that night after I got home and just never played poker again. So I guess the lesson here is, don't give up. Like, no matter how hard it feels, if you truly love this game and you want to be something in this game, you've got to keep coming back and getting smacked in the face time and time again. Just keep going.
Do you think there is any hard and fast rules then with, say, bankroll management, or make sure you play a certain amount of hands at each limit, or even could you skip limits, or
like, I don't,
just
I think,
see how you feel at each one, really?
Yeah, I think these days the games are a lot tougher. So 10 NL now is like what 100 NL used to be. Probably around there, I would say. So it's like 10 times harder, obviously. And like these days, if you do what I did, you will just get nowhere. You'll just lose a bunch of money. You'll just be a DJ. Like, you can't play 25 NL as your starting stake as a big loser, because it's just like having a gambling problem, right? It's like losing a lot of money. Like, $25 a buy-in is a lot of money when it all adds up. So you do need to start lower these days. What I did only worked because A, it was 2008 and the games were super soft, and B, I had, I would say, far above, without being arrogant, a natural ability at this game that most people don't have. And that was why I was able to do that. Most people, I would say, especially these days, have, I mean, you might even be really talented, but even if you are, you still want to give your mental game time to build up. You want to nurture your mental game. You don't want to like throw it in at the deep end and just play a stake that you can't handle psychologically. So yeah, I had a different kind of tilt where I hated playing low stakes, but that's not healthy either. You know, you want to treat poker as a really healthy hobby where what you win is just big blinds and you build a bankroll and it's not got anything to do with money. If you can train yourself that by taking a game like 2NL, like you were doing as well, Ben, taking 2NL really seriously and beating it first,
Yeah.
it does give you a really good precedent. It gives you a really good kind of foundation mentally to move through the stakes. So I wouldn't recommend doing what I did because I only made it by luck. I could have easily just given up at some point because my approach was so bad. And, I would never be where I am today. So don't do what I did, basically. No way.
What now do you think is the biggest difference between certain limits? I mean, I've heard from some people that say the difference between 2NL and 5NL was the biggest gap you'd come across. Then from others I hear it's between, say, 10, 25, 50 and 100 even.
I mean, I think there is a huge gap between 2NL and 5NL because 2NL players are generally really horrific. 5NL players are, a lot of people start at 5NL, that's what you've got to remember. Like, a lot of people don't play 2NL at all, they bypass it because it's just like complete, it's like an insult for some people, and I don't think that's a good thing to have that mentality where you're insulted by playing 2NL, but a lot of regs start at 5NL. So there is a big gap there between 2NL and 5NL. There's a lot more regs at 5NL than there are at 2. 2NL's full of fish. So it's probably the biggest gap. But I don't know what the best analogy is here, but it's not the most difficult gap because 2NL is so easy that jumping to 5NL might be a huge gap, but it's still not that difficult.
Still fairly low.
Yeah, but it's just relative to 2NL, it's a huge jump. But if you talk about the jump from 10 to 25, which is where most of my students contact me, most of my students are stuck at 10NL. They've beaten 5NL and they're stuck at 10. That's the most common thing. Why can they not beat 10NL? Because that's the first big skill jump, I would say, is to beat 10NL. 2NL, 5NL, you can get through those stakes with a bit of help, especially with coaching and, the right approach within like a year easily. 10NL takes a bit longer and you've got to be solid. You've got to see where the regs are going wrong. You've got to exploit them. You've got to have a better sense of what your range is and what good strategic poker actually is.
What's the outstanding difference? Is it just that I imagine it's much, much more aggro?
Yeah, more aggression, less free money, and people don't make as many massive, glaring, nitty mistakes. People are still too nitty at 10NL. Like, the regs are horrible. But that's relative to what I'm used to, playing higher and like understanding the game on a deeper level. So relative to the 5NL regs, they're actually good. That's the thing. But if you can get through 10, like I think 25 is also beatable with a bit of time. I think 50, again, there's like another jump there, but there's a lot of bad regs at 50, and then I think the second biggest jump is between 50 and 100 NL. I think that's when it gets quite tough these days. At like 100 no limit is a lot tougher than it used to be.
Right, okay. And as you were going through them, is there one concept, one piece of theory that you would say was the most difficult to learn?
I never found poker theory difficult at all. I found mental game really difficult. So to be honest, like when I was learning about poker, I guess the math was the hardest thing for me because I just, after school, I didn't really do any math. I did a lot of logic and a philosophy degree, but I didn't really practice maths very much and I kind of didn't like it. And so I kind of shied away from doing EV calcs and stuff like that. So if I had to pick a technical part, I'd say the math I neglected for far too long and then just sort of realised it wasn't too bad and I could do it quite easily when I actually looked at it. But the biggest challenge for me was mental game, without a doubt. Like, that was 50 times harder than anything in the technical game of poker.
Right, okay. And was there one thing that you wish you'd known or done differently? I know it's a bit of a vague question, but like I wish I'd started finding serious books as soon as I started playing, or it took me 6 months before I even got a HUD set up.
Okay, so you wasted a lot of time just kind of not really knowing what direction to take. I mean, I'm really happy with where I am today. I would say that I could have got there faster and I could have got a lot more out of the golden era of poker and crushed for a lot more if I just wasn't such a little brat. So I guess what I wish is that I accepted that I was bad sooner instead of thinking like, I knew I had some kind of gift for the game. I knew I was like better at it than the average person by a considerable distance, but I kind of like hadn't harnessed that skill yet. I hadn't actually developed it into what it needed to be. So I was assuming I was already God when I was still bad. I was still making loads of mistakes. I hadn't taken the game seriously enough. So if there's anything I would have changed, it would have been being far more humble, objective, and realistic from the start, instead of making myself plans where in 4 months I'd be like at the top of the game and stuff like that when I was only playing 50 NL. But I guess like as time goes on, you mature and you grow up, and like part of growing up is being more realistic and more in touch with like what's normal ambition, what's an achievable dream. So I think when you're young, like that's when you're at your most sponge-like. Like that's when, like if I tried to learn poker today, like starting out as a beginner, I'd never get to where I was, because I think when you're young, like, not to say that you can't learn it when you're a bit older, like in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and there's no limit, you can still learn, but it's easier when you're like 21, 23, 25. You know, at that point, I wish that I was a bit more mature and took poker with more discipline at that point, I guess, and more, you know, realism.
Yeah. And what happens after 200 NL as well? I imagine, is that where you get full-time pros grinding? Is that another level altogether, I suppose?
These days, after 200 NL, there's like this giant void. Like if you imagine in the solar system, like you get to Mars, and then there's like miles and like light years before you get to Jupiter. There's like this
I don't even know
gap.
What's after 200. Is it just 500?
Yeah, but that's what it's like. It's like 200 NL is like Mars. It's like the last planet at the start of the solar system that you can really like see. And then there's like the nothingness where there's just no one, you know. Then there's 500 NL, which is like a bunch of pros like struggling out and trying to find action, and there's hardly any fish around. And most people grind 200. I don't think there's even that many people that play 500 seriously all the time, because the games can just get so dry that there's not much there, and they're forced to step down. So these days you get some very, very good players at 200 NL that you wouldn't have got like 5 years ago, because there was more action. There was 2-5 games and 5-10 games, 3-6 games, all that kind of shit in between. There was all of that back in the day that kept the really, really good regs out of the kind of 200 NL stakes, but now that's gone. You get good regs playing 200 NL online now. That's the sad reality.
Yeah. You touched on it there, something else I was wondering. You have regs now with programs like seat scripting. So they're all just diving onto fish as soon as they appear on the table.
Yeah.
Those games get tougher and tougher and tougher, I suppose.
Yeah.
Do you think things like that are a good thing? I mean, seat scripting, do you think it becomes a bit like cheating?
I think there.
Even say a HUD.
I think a HUD is a good thing, because a HUD tracks things, and there's a real skill in using a HUD. There's a real skill in interpreting the data correctly, and like just that data interpretation is huge. Like if you know how to read your HUD, you know what different stats mean, you know how to like track how someone's playing and actually draw the right conclusions from it, then you're way ahead of most HUD users, right? So HUD is a resource, but it's like a sword. Like you can give a sword to like 50 people. It doesn't mean they'll just all be as proficient with it, right? And there's nothing wrong with like having the sword, because in like samurai fights, I'm going to stop rambling, but you get the analogy, right? Like the skilled samurai or whatnot, it's going to do way better with a sword than like you or I probably, right? So it's the same with a HUD. You know, you give a fish a HUD, he'll probably play even worse than if he didn't have a HUD, because he'll just completely misinterpret everything. So HUDs I have no problem with. I think that they should be allowed. They should never be banned. I think if they get banned, you reduce poker to this having to sit and watch in case something happens, and you become like this human just kind of data collector, and that is just brainless, and it takes so much of the skill and potential and volume out of the game that you need a HUD. I think it's essential in order to actually get enough volume in to win. Like this game is not beatable at low volume. If you're going to have to sit and like track and tally things on a piece of paper to see how people are playing, then just forget it. I'd rather like go and do almost any other job in the world within reason. Seat scripting is actually targeting a weak player. It's actually designing software to instantly place you there before other regs get the chance. It's cheating in the sense that there's no skill in using it. Like the HUD is like the sword, you know, there's so much skill in using it. When one person wields it so much better than the other. But any reg at all can seek script as effectively as any other reg. That's like having a nuke button that you can just press. There's no skill in it at all. And that's unethical. And that is killing the games, and it's creating this horrible... Like, Stars got rid of Heads Up because Heads Up non-zoom was literally just bum hunters sitting there and jumping on fish as soon as they appeared with their scripts. It was just horrible place to be. And I think that seat scripting programs should not exist.
Yeah, because I think I read something that people were asking for them to be banned in some cases, and that Stars were considering it.
They should. I mean, if they're going to ban fucking Poker Ranger, right, a program which allows you to study in depth and actually get ahead of the competition through hard work, like, okay, you can't have it open when you're playing, but like, what are you going to do? Like, anyone can print off a Poker Ranger picture and have a chart, you know what I mean? Like anyone can, you're not going to do a huge complicated range calculation in 10 seconds in the middle of a hand. So I think the priorities are all wrong. Like, you're going to ban Poker Ranger while Stars is on, yet there's still seat scripting programs going on. Like, it just seems backwards to me.
Sure. And last question I had was that you said you started off playing sit and goes too.
Yep.
And I remember I messed around with sit and goes myself as well in some like 180 man tourneys on the start. Do you think that you have to choose between games, or can you master different types of games, i.e. cash games and sit and goes, or cash games and tourneys?
I think that to be someone who's never tried to be good at cash is a categorical mistake. I think that cash is so foundational that to not become at least semi-proficient at cash is you're missing the essence of poker. You know, you're missing like the very point that you need to have the good foundation. The other way around though, if you want to like never play sit and goes, I think you can live with that. I think there's nothing wrong with never playing tournaments or sit and goes and not really caring, because they're like children of cash. They're like a kind of sub branch that's like a deviation of cash, I guess. A derivative, I guess, is what they are. So
yeah, I feel like cash gives you grounding in the absolute fundamentals, right, which you need to take into other stuff.
Exactly. So if you're a sit and go tournament player and that's where your aspirations lie, I would advise you to get at least some practice at cash, and also like playing heads up. You know, that is like the pure essence of poker. Try just playing some heads up if you can, even if it's just with a friend or something. Work on that too. Study it a bit, because that's also like the pure essence. But I think if you're a cash player, there's no need to try and play sit and goes. And if you're a cash player, it's probably disadvantageous for you to try and play sit and goes and stuff as well. I just did it because I found tournaments tilted me less. There was more control over what I was losing or winning. And that was fine. And I did that for mental game reasons, but I always wanted to play cash because I always knew deep down that that's where it's at. That's like the heart and soul of poker. So, you know, play cash, be a real poker player. If you want to play sit and goes or tournaments, there is skill in that, but also play cash at some point so you can be that full, complete poker player. That's my advice on that one.
There's some room to mess around in sit and goes if you want to mix things up sometimes.
Yeah, there's some room to do it for fun, but like if you're doing it like all the time, then you're becoming a jack of all trades, or trying to and failing, which is just going to hold you back. You want to play one game, be it PLO, no limit hold'em, six max, whatever, and similarly you'd like to play one variant. So if you do play some cash as a sit and go player, it's a side project and you just focus really hard on sit and goes. Like whatever you decide is your game, you put everything into that, and everything else you do is just to like cover yourself and make you a complete player, like playing cash sometimes just to get a feel or whatnot. Don't like spread yourself too thin.
Yeah. That's all I've got.
Cool, Ben. That was really interesting. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Yeah, I'll get you back on and check in your progress when you've moved up to the next stake, and hopefully a month or two's time for sure.
Sounds good. Cheers.
No worries. As for the rest of you, I am still taking on students. Getting kind of busy. If you want to work with me, probably good to get in touch soon and just book something starting in a few weeks' time. I may have availability to take you on straight away, like within a week or a few days sometimes, but I can't guarantee that right now. But if you do want to get in touch, it's admin@carrotcorner.com. And for all full information about packages, pricing, credentials, just check out my website, carrotcorner.com. If you've not got yourself a copy of that Grinders Manual yet, go ahead and grab one, carrotcorner.com. If you buy the PDF, I'll give you a free Kindle. Don't buy the Kindle and ask for a free PDF, because, as we know, Amazon takes lots and lots of the profits of us poor poker writers, or any writer. So if you buy the PDF, I can give you a Kindle version. Don't worry about that. But if you do go into Amazon and order the Kindle, then I don't make very much, so I won't give you a free PDF. So I just want to make that clear to all my listeners who are considering buying the book. Would you recommend the book, Ben, based on what you've read?
Grinder's Manual, without a doubt, yeah. That's been super helpful to me.
It's very comprehensive as a thing. It's a full textbook, so I definitely recommend it. The sample on the website.
Realise how much I don't actually know.
Right, exactly. Which everyone has to get to that point where they realise they know nothing, so they can begin to know something. Right, guys, this has been Pete. I will see you on the next podcast, and we will keep this up regularly this year. I'm not going to make a promise I can't stick to, twice a week or something like that, but at least, aiming for once a week. Not saying there won't be gaps, but we'll try and make it a regular thing. Alright guys, until next time.